So I'll use some notes because I want to actually cover some parts in an organized way. Uh, but like, I think very similar journeys as Sanjay from ShopClues and Ajit from for Lenko described. So I think like the founder journeys are very similar. There's a phase where there's a dark period which nobody knows you, the company is unknown, and then you sort of either users start using you or you get you raise money and the press writes about you, etc., etc. So I want to maybe break this talk down into two parts. One is like, I'm actually going to talk about strategies about how to deal with the tough part of starting up. Like, I get a lot of entrepreneurs talking about like three common questions. One is like how to start up, like when to start up kind of thing. Second is like how to survive when you have no money and funding. The third part is when to fundraise and how to do that. And the fourth part is like when to actually quit. So like these are questions, and like I've not been on the when to quit side, but I've had friends who quit. So I'm going to talk about it, and we'll keep it like open, and you can ask me questions. I'll keep the last 5 minutes. So the organizers can tell me when we have 10 minutes, and then I'll just shift to questions. So the first things first, like we started our journey in 2011. So again, very similar to some of the speakers who have been here. Like I also moved back from the US. My moving back was easier. I had no family in the US, and like it was very easy to move back from that perspective. But the tough part was like there's so many things like as a 25-year-old you can do in the US. So you can like think about like, hey, the startup ecosystem is more mature over there. It's very, very early stage in India. So it's actually much, much harder to move back to start a company. Because in India, like the first thing which like some neighborhood auntie will ask you is like, beta kitna kamate ho? So, I mean, those kind of things like sort of, like India is not very startup friendly for its entrepreneurs in the beginning. But the amazing part of India is like you can actually keep your burn rate low. So I actually moved in with my family, my parents in Delhi. And so your burn rate goes down. What does that mean? That you have a longer runway for you to work on your startup. So fortunately, our startup did not have a lot of like capital intensive assets which were required, like unlike for Lenko's business. So we had like a easier time. All we had to do was build a product which people actually wanted. So again, starting Cleartax, because like India is not known as a country where we pay taxes. So only 3% of the Indian population today pays taxes, which is like about 4.5 crore people. But like I think with Modi's demonetization, the number will go up. So we're going to be one of the beneficiaries of this like entire change. And back in 2011, like funding was mostly for e-commerce businesses. Fintech was not even a word which like the ecosystem was talking about. So like we had to really think about, hey, who's going to, how do we run this business? So I think like very early we decided like that we are not going to look for funding. So, and that became very, that was very useful as a construct because then we just focused on what we can do without money. And it's amazing, like when you set your mind to it, like how far can you go without money, you go very, very far. So basically then we started thinking about how do we acquire users and what value we create for them. And every day we thought about, hey, if we create enough value, can these users talk about us to their friends, their colleagues, their coworkers? So I think like those factors really work for us. So I think for 3 years we bootstrapped the business, but we also kept growing. So we reached like with 4 people, like me and my co-founders, to like lakhs of users and India's largest tax website, even before we went to Y Combinator. So I think like most people like sort of have to think about like funding and marketing dollars is not what you need all the time. So these are things which are very important. And I can go into like the question of why did we raise capital, why did we go to YC. So we'll get into that part. So coping strategies, I will talk about like how to start, when to start. So I think first things first, your personal burn rate has to be low. My personal burn rate went very, very low because I was paying no rent to my parents and like they would feed me food, home cooked food. So, so it's very easy. So I think like people with kids, people with like families to support really need to solve that because otherwise what happens is like in the Maslow hierarchy, like if you're dealing with survival all the time, you can't create value for others. First, you need to have like your needs sorted, the roti, kapda, makan, etc. So that's very important. So this is a very common question people ask me, like, you need time in India, like you need like a runway which is a few years long. So either you have to have savings or you need to figure out alternate strategies or get funding. So one of the three. The other part is like the the aspect of what skills you have, right? Like if you know programming and you know how to build a product, if you're building a software company, depends on which kind of company you build, right? For us, it was a software company. So those skills, if you, like I had them, my co-founders had them. So we did not need external vendors or we didn't need employees going in. So these are the kind of thought process you have to bring. Like if your business is going to be capital intensive, you need to be very good at fundraising or you cannot do that business. I mean, like at some point, you need to raise capital for a capital intensive business. And I can, as your businesses grow, you'll need more capital, but hopefully that follows with the growth of your business. So coming back to how to start, when to start, if you have a very clear framework that, hey, I have 2 years or 3 years or n number of years where I can sustain myself or our team can sustain itself without like dependency on others, that's actually a very great place to start. And then second thing people can focus on, and this YC talks about a lot, you get to what they call as ramen profitability, which means like you get to a place where you have free cash flow. And so this can happen in businesses which generally start to throw cash. So again, B2B businesses are more friendly to this than B2C. So yeah, when you are starting out, like if you're thinking about these things in a fundamental way, it'll help you avoid failure or like doubt or fear later in your journey. So all startup journeys are tough. Like there is so much pain. Like every day, like till you hit a traction point, it's easy to give up, shut down that website, and go get a job. So I think like the incredible perseverance required to start a startup is anyway needed. I am going to give you just coping strategies for a bit. So the other one which I thought like was things which I did well was I actually made non-startup and non-technology friends. So that really helped because they didn't care about how successful or how like badly I was doing. They didn't care at all. So I picked up a sport called Ultimate Frisbee, which is a very niche sport. Almost nobody in India plays it. I used to play it in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, and so I just found a team in Delhi which was playing this sport. So niche sports are like a startup, like in that sense. It's filled with oddballs, people who are in it for just the love of the sport. And so we had like college kids and working professionals, housewives, all sorts of people. So it was very liberating. It's a cheap sport, like there's no cost to playing it. All you need is a pair of running shoes. So in that, like it became very, very, like, how do you say it? Like in a group of people who you gather for a purpose of playing something, it's incredibly stress busting. And then you could go back to work and they didn't care about how badly or how good you were doing. Because your peer group, especially when you go to an engineering college, is usually working at like companies like McKinsey or like companies, other successful companies, and getting paid a lot of money. So sort of like that benchmark, that measurement of like your success with money always sort of bogs you down. So thinking about those in a way which helps you cope, like that always helps. For me, the other thing which I used to do, which I don't recommend, but I used to every weekend read some essays by Paul Graham. So he's like the founder of Y Combinator, and I don't know how many of you know who Paul Graham is, but it's a very startup audience, so I'm assuming many of you know. So these essays would just like help me think about like, hey, this is a guy writing about like how to cope with starting a company, like how to start a startup, because the highs are highs and the lows are very low. So, and sometimes they come in the same day. So you'll not believe like how bad it gets and how great it gets. So, and then you sort of learn to like not react. On the first day of YC, actually, it's incredible. Like Paul Graham walks into the room and then he says like, the ideal startup founder is like James Bond. Like even in a bad situation, he figures out what to do next to save the day, right? So that's a good model, right? Every time you're thinking, like, just channel your inner James Bond into your startup. So, like, every moment, just think about what would James Bond do. So, uh, like, coming back, so the essays would help me. So that was the one of the coping strategies. I also got like great co-founders. So I'm incredibly lucky. I didn't have them when I started the company. So I met Shivatsan and Ankit, and we started to spend time together. And that week, where I was talking to them about them joining Cleartax, there was very early phase. There was no YC, there was no external validation. We had a very small number of users. It was incredibly painful, like for me also personally, to have them join the mission, because it felt like it's so painful every day to run this company, and I'm going to get these two people who are incredibly nice people to join my startup, and they will also go through this incredible pain. So you're like thinking about this like, oh God, I will be subjecting these friends of mine to this pain. So, but what you then realize, you have this very clear vision that, that some things must be done. And I'll talk about what the Cleartax vision is like. And people think of us as a tax company, which is very good for competition reasons, because then they don't understand what we do. And, but we are a pure tech company disguised as a tax company, which is awesome. Now people understand fintech a lot more, so we are now starting to get competitors, but it's been a good place to be like hidden in plain sight. So, so yeah, like I think that that vision sort of helps you stay true to what you're doing. It's like running a company has to be like, you have to be a little bit crazy, because like if you're not in love with the vision, what you do, why you do it, it'll be easy to give up. There will be so many bad things that will happen to you that you'll be like, why am I doing this? So the why am I doing this will get like in your face every day. And so if you don't have a good answer, that is the day you will give up. So I always think about like talking to founders about why are they starting, what keeps them going. So because it's very easy to give up. So just think about that while you're working on it. The third one, which I talk about to people, entrepreneurs who are struggling, and most of us struggle. So I think the struggle is the norm. So actually thinking about like, hey, am I alone in this struggle? You're not alone. The second part is thinking about how do you go through the struggle. So like I always recommend to founders to stop just before they sort of break down. So the emotional breakdown boundary is what you don't want to hit. That you're basically like now, like you're not able to think clearly anymore. That is the point when you want to stop. So whenever you are approaching that point, that's a good place to stop. So most people like sort of don't recognize that. And I've seen people, a lot of people, my close friends who are founders, like feel very depressed for a bit. And so that is the dark moment where I say like it's a good place to stop. But that's the only one I recommend. Other than that, like I say, keep going. So, but anyway, I'll also now talk about a little bit on Y Combinator and why is it good, why should people apply. In this room, like how many are early stage founders who would like to apply to YC? Show of hands. Okay, good. So this is a good room I'm speaking to. Okay, so what I'll do is like first I'll talk about what YC brings to the table, then how do you apply, what can you expect, and like how do you succeed in that application. So the first one is what YC brings to the table. So it actually brings in a great set of, a great network with it, like in terms of both founders, investors, and advisors. So founders, like the YC network of other founders is actually incredible. The amount of help you get from them is actually more than the help you get from the YC partners. So most people don't realize this from going in. They look at the advisors, partners, and the YC brand, but actually it's the other founders who help you a lot. The other one is like you'll actually make a very good peer set, just like college. Like remember when you went to college and you made like 10 best friends over the course of 3-4 years? That's how YC feels in the 3 months you're at YC. You'll meet incredible founders who, like in my batch, there were founders of nuclear power companies, biotechnology companies, fintech companies, blockchain, people like us doing taxes, payments, etc., etc. So you will make incredible friendships with people who are solving very difficult problems, like Ginkgo Bioworks, like YC batchmate of ours, recently raised $100 million, and they have like 3 wet labs researching molecules, for example. Kelly's a close friend now. So I mean, those are the kind of things YC gives you, which is very, very nice. So the other one is like the advisors, like Paul Graham, Sam Altman, all these other guys, like are incredibly sharp in thinking about problems, in trying to help you think through your idea, pivot from your idea, change your idea, or like actually just heads down focusing on your idea. So I think just that right mentorship sometimes helps a lot. The third one is actually fundraising. Like Vice is actually very effective in fundraising if you have a good product or a good like company. So because they sort of have access to the best, let me rephrase, they have the access to all these Silicon Valley based investors and like they have a lot of international investment firms also who come to YC. So it's actually pretty easy to raise money if you have a good product, good company, good story, good founders. So I think those factor also, because fundraising is anyway difficult to do. So that activation energy, if it can be brought down by YC, that helps your company grow faster. And the end outcome is always objective, right? You want to grow fast and get to like the largest possible outcome for your company as soon as possible. So these are the thoughts on why you should apply to YC. So any founder who's in who's early stage, seed stage, Series A, I recommend that look at YC. The second one is like people think about how to apply. So the how to apply part is actually fairly straightforward, but I will break it down for everybody. That first, that you must write the application well. So writing the application well is not like a essay, not like a test for your English comprehension or English writing, etc., etc. In this YC batch this year, I think they've accepted maybe 9 to 10 India-focused companies. So they are looking at India very actively. It's a great time for all of you to apply, even if you are working on an India problem or a global problem. Like there are companies which are working on drone operating systems, companies which are working on crowdsourcing, companies which are different types of companies which have gotten into YC this year. So what I personally feel is like that it really doesn't matter what your idea is. In 2014, when we applied to YC, it was completely counterintuitive to go to Silicon Valley for an India-focused idea. And it has worked out well for us, so I highly recommend that you apply. The application process is actually very, very clarifying to think about your idea because it asks you very, very basic questions. What is it that you're working on? A lot of people, I've realized, in early stage situations haven't really made up their minds on what they're working on. Their ideas are evolving, thought process is constantly changing. So that question itself just forces you to think very clearly what you're doing. The second one is, what value do you create for your customers? Like these are the questions YC will pay attention to. What value do you create for your customers? So that means, that literally means like, what is it that you're bringing into the world? What is so innovative about it? What is so important about it? How will it affect users? And do you understand your users well or not? So what solutions exist and what are you changing in the world? So if these two questions are answered very properly, I think rest flows from that. But then they definitely want to understand your relationship with your co-founders. So a lot of starting initial teams fall apart, and YC is like actually looks at that as an indicator of startups failing when the founding teams fall apart. So like in the nature of order of things, having great co-founders, no co-founders, and bad co-founders. So basically, you literally want the best co-founders you can find. And if you don't have co-founders, that's actually not a bad thing, but don't get bad co-founders. So the aspect which you want to understand is that YC wants to understand how your relationship with your co-founders is. Because like your co-founders like being married to that person. Like you will see their faces for 18-hour days if your startups are successful. So like 18-hour days you will spend with people. So make sure you actually build great relationships with them. So So that's the sort of thing YC looks for. And the application itself, you need to be very concise, very brief, and you have to write with the highest amount of clarity that you can. Get like a few people to review your applications, people, your peer set, people who write well, just get help in those axes. If you get shortlisted for the interview, then the interview is like just 10 minutes. They will ask you like, it'll feel like a rapid fire, like a lot of questions will be asked to you within the 10 minutes, and you have to give proper great answers to those in the 10 minutes. So, I mean, okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for that. So, yeah, basically, so this is how the YC process looks like, and that's all I had. YC is a 3-month program which leads up to a demo day where you will interact with 400 investors. So it's actually pretty good for fundraising. Just stepping back before I open up the floor, the Cleartax vision is basically like helping, like now we help millions of consumers and businesses deal with their government, both in terms of, like taxes is just the start for us. So we think of how do we build fintech software which is approachable and usable and gives the power of invoicing, accounting, getting a business started, getting consultants, etc., everything in one package to a consumer or business. And what we build on top of this is how does machine learning and data behavioral patterns influence people's financial decision making. So that is where the company is going, and this is what we now do. We have like maybe, we have now 4 verticals that as a company we build out, which include personal wealth, taxes and GST, which is the new India digital stack which we are working on. Actually, the India stack is fantastic because it gives us identity and payments, as Lalitesh talked about. And the third one we do is like the whole invoicing, accounting, etc. for businesses. And now we have a lot of engineering bandwidth devoted to how do we use machine learning, data sciences, and behavioral pattern to figure out how do financial decisions happen for SMEs and consumers. We today address 4 crore Indians, but like as India grows, the prosperity grows, we'll help like crores of Indians in this problem.